Твою мать!
Oh, shit!
Твою мать!
There's a drone right above us. We're living! We're alive! Oh! That was a Ukrainian drone hunting us!
My friends, Avdiivka is falling apart faster than my 2005 Jetta. You can patch it up as much as you want. It's just a matter of time before it ends up in the scrapyard. Alright, are you ready? Let's jump right in. As we're speaking, the battle is clearly lost. Hundreds of Ukrainians are desperately trying to escape the encirclement by any means possible, but thousands are definitely trapped. Since my last video on Avdiivka, within a week, detachments of the Russian Guards and the Russian Volunteer Corps have made all these gains. They stormed all these tree lines, all the while pushing towards the citadel and the Avdiivka coke plant. As you can see in this video, Russian troops planted the red banner at the exact spot where Zelensky took his selfie in December. In the south, facing encirclement, the Ukrainians had to abandon the Zenit stronghold just like we spoke about a couple days ago. To me, it's clear that the Russian intention is to take Zenit into a pincer. I will also tell you about the tragic story of the Ukrainian soldiers that defended Zenit until the end and that tried to break out through Russian lines. Thereafter, the Russians swiftly occupied the position and raised their banners over the former air defense base. The Russian troops are 800 meters away from cutting off the last exit route of the Ukrainian army. Do you understand how critical this situation is? It's only a matter of time before the Russian assault detachments storm the citadel. C'est fini, bro. What do you want me to tell you? Even the Washington Post has no other choice but to state the obvious. A full withdrawal from Avdiivka now seems likely. And now a reported 4,000 to 7,000 Ukrainian soldiers are essentially trapped, encircled by the Russian army, and who suffer from continuous artillery shelling night and day. You're witnessing one of Ukraine's worst military disasters because the generals of our beloved Ukrainskaya Armia waited too long to pull out their men out of the cauldron.
Madness. Madness and stupidity.
Here you can see a Ukrainian company anxiously listening to the explosions in Avdiivka, knowing they're the next wave to be sent into the meat grinder. The new commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian army, General Syrsky, has now decided to send more men into the cauldron. General, how many companies towards Avdiivka? Oh, you mean a couple battalions? In order to keep this gate of hell open and prevent this boiler from collapsing on itself. The best way to describe what Ukrainian troops are currently facing is
Horror.
That's how Syrsky took over the disastrous siege of Avdiivka and redeployed his elite 3rd Assault Brigade Azov right into the furnace. Here's what the speaker of the Azov Brigade had to say about their new mission. And like that, all geared up, with the roaring sound of the BMPs fading away in the distance, these ideologically motivated soldiers covered in eagles, Hindu symbols, and Viking tattoos were parachuted into chaos against an enemy 7 times more numerous. They knew that only death and turmoil awaited them, but they went in anyway, not for Ukraine, but for their friends and comrades. The sacrifice of the Azov Brigade allowed hundreds of small groups of Ukrainian soldiers to painfully retreat towards friendly lines across open fields. From this moment on, I only see two options. Number one, the 3rd Assault Brigade charge into the flanks to cover the retreat of the Avdiivka garrison, just like they did in Bakhmut, by expanding the perimeter in which the units will withdraw. Number two, they will replace the shattered units that have been defending the city for months and gain time in order to allow the Ukrainian army to form a new line of defense at the rear. However, this would mean get encircled and fight to a last stand, just like they did in Mariupol. Although we all know who should intervene to save Avdiivka. That's right, the immediate counterattack of the 200th Airsoft NAFO Twitter Brigade, supported by the 69th Desktop Reddit Trolls. Welcome to History Legends, and here are the latest news of the Russo-Ukraine war. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. As you know, some of my Ukraine videos have been targeted with limited or no ads, so make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal to keep the show running. Thank you to everyone that has already helped. And welcome to the headquarters. How exactly did Ukraine end up in such a nightmare? Well, we know it. It's because they waited too long before organizing a proper withdrawal.
Narrator updates window. Narrator window heading level 1. Exiting narrator.
Nobody likes an early pullout, but sometimes that's what's necessary to avoid long-term consequences. We know that the armored units of the 47th and 116th Mechanized Brigades already intervened to support the southern flank of Avdiivka. That should have been the waking call, but clearly nothing was done. After breaking through in Avdiivka proper from the north, the Russian command poured in reinforcements, like this Russian fire team of 6 soldiers progressing towards the front. This group was intercepted by Ukrainian drone right here on the map, meaning like many other reinforcements, it advanced along this road to reach the contact line. In the night of February 10th to the 11th, Russian troops took advantage of the fog covering Avdiivka and its surroundings to launch assault operations. That's how they successfully pushed out of Opitne, thus sealing the fate of the Zenit air defense base. In the north, they fully secured the railway crossing and established a solid bridgehead on the western side of it. At that moment, advanced elements of the Russian army were only 200 meters away from Ukraine's main supply road. It was now or never for Ukraine to withdraw its troops and not turn Avdiivka into Mariupol 2.0. With that being said, organizing a retreat is perhaps one of the most difficult military maneuvers to pull off, especially with all the depleted forces of the Avdiivka garrison. On the 10th of February, General Alexander Tarnavsky, the commander of the Ukrainian grouping in Avdiivka, officially announced that reinforcements were on their way. On Telegram, he said, "We gave an adequate response to the actions of the enemy. We strengthened the blocking line, set up additional firing positions, and used fresh, effective forces. Logistical delivery continues."
Right.
At that point, Tarnavsky had to coordinate 2 operations. Number 1, pull back the surviving units of the 110th Mechanized Brigade step by step from the exposed eastern part of the city. Consolidate the Ukrainian line in central Avdiivka until they can safely retreat out of the city. Number 2, reinforce the flanks of the 110th Mechanized Brigade and try to push the much larger Russian force away from the garrison's last supply lines. I'm mainly talking about the 110th Mechanized Brigade, but there are also many other units defending the fortress. And it's not a surprise that on the 11th of February, Forbes reported Ukraine may have deployed one of its best brigades to try to save Avdiivka, namely General Syrsky's most trusted unit, the 3rd Assault Brigade Azov. Essentially, the plan was probably the same as what General Syrsky did in the Bakhmut meat grinder: counterattack with elite units on the flanks, widen the perimeter, and allow the garrison to withdraw. However, the difference is that in Bakhmut, the Ukrainians were only facing the Wagner Corps, which essentially had no aviation, very little artillery support, and almost no armored formations. And let's be honest, since then the Russians have also improved their tactical skills. Meanwhile, the former Wagnerians reorganized their assault units for their next push. as Russian aviation hammered the Citadel district with dozens of FAB-500 bombs. Literally entire commie blocks were Ctrl-Alt-deleted. In this video, Ukrainian troops are hiding in the basements from Putin's symphony. On the 13th of February, the Ukrainian media reported that finally, after 2 years at the front, the 110th Mechanized Brigade was rotated out of the city. If you ask me personally, I press X for doubt. If that was true and they actually achieved that overnight, it means there were only 10 guys left in the brigade. Obviously, that's not what the spokesman of the brigade actually said.
Перше за 2 роки, майже 2 роки оборони Авдіївки 110-ю окремою механізованою бригадою, деякі наші підрозділи нарешті вивели.
You heard it. He clearly said some units were withdrawn. How many is that? Historians will tell us. But according to the spokesman of the 3rd Assault Brigade Azov, the Russians are 7 times more numerous. We know that the Russians have 50,000 troops around Avdiivka, meaning at this moment there's still around 7,000 Ukrainian soldiers stuck in that cauldron. And on top of that, it was reported that this withdrawal had to be done at night, with all the lights of the vehicles turned off. One can wonder the price of a mile. To avoid the nightmare scenario of losing this road of life, elements of the 3rd Assault Brigade Azov arrived via the coke plant to counterattack, like this group aboard a Max Pro MRAP firing at advancing Russian units. They were geolocated right here, and we can assume they were probably targeting the following Russian soldiers that infiltrated neighboring buildings right at the edge of the city. At the same time, the Avdiivka coke plant was also feeling the heat of the continuous shelling, as you can see in this video. This foreshadowed the claws of the Russian bear closing in on this infamous industrial area. These counterattacks by Azov came at a cost. That's how Captain Andrei Iskra was KIA on the 12th of February. What makes the task of Azov and this entire rescue operation so difficult is that the commanders of the 110th Mechanized Brigade, who stood there for 2 years, neglected to build any new backup fortifications towards the rear. Now that the Russians broke through the first line of defense, it's open bar. Despite the greatest efforts of Ukrainian units, the Russians captured this entire sector of Avdiivka. That was catastrophic for multiple reasons. Number 1, Russia now fully controlled the last paved road going into the city. Number 2, this means that the Avdiivka coke plant was now cut off from the rest of the city. Number 3, there would be little chance for the remaining Ukrainian defenders of Avdiivka to withdraw out of the cauldron with all their heavy equipment and armored vehicles. It's also important to mention that a Russian missile strike targeted a Ukrainian military base in Selitovo on the 13th of February. Reportedly, 300 soldiers meant to rescue Avdiivka were KIA. What a disaster. From that moment on, the Ukrainian defense of the city was holding on 4 key positions that for geographical reasons I nicknamed PAWG. P for the Avdiivka coke plant, A for the train station and the surrounding tree lines, W for the citadel, and G for the Zenit air defense base. Sector A is by far the most important to hold at all costs. If Sector A falls to the enemy, all hope is lost, because it connects all defensive positions with one another and it protects Ukraine's rear door. Then on Deep State UA map, you can see that there's actually another road going into Avdiivka. But let's be honest, this is a scam. In reality, there is no road. You just gotta look at it from a satellite perspective. There are only dirt paths across fields. And because the winter was so short, we have already entered the Rasputitsa season. I mean, look at this video. This pickup is fully stuck in the mud. It's literally drowning. That's why these 2 Ukrainian soldiers are complaining that the only way to reach Avdiivka now is by foot, and they have to carry all their ammunition with them. To make matters even worse, this exit route is under Russian fire control. It's only a matter of time before you have FPV drones swarming the entire sector, meaning that every Ukrainian unit that will attempt to break out from Avdiivka will literally play Russian roulette. And the tragedy of all this is that Ukraine is already facing a shortage of manpower. They cannot afford to waste more lives. As they passed and the weather got warmer, all Ukrainian columns meant to support Avdiivka came to a standstill. Meanwhile, on the 14th of February, according to some reports, the Ukrainian troops inside Avdiivka were getting ready for a breakout from the rapidly forming encirclement. Yet, no breakout order was given for the Ukrainians. But the Russians kept sending fresh reinforcements into the breach, like these fighters of the Sarmat battalion of the Triple D strong Donbass Wild Division, or in Russian, Dikoy Divizii Donbassa. Russian assault detachments stormed 500 meters in open terrain and got a foothold along this tree line. There was this video showing the aftermath of one of such firefights.
Сколько вас, Да. Семеро было. Сколько осталось? Все сдались.
You clearly see that the position was only defended by 7 soldiers. By the 15th of February, Russian stormtroopers expanded their positions across Sector A and cleared 1.6 kilometers of this tree line. They were now only 800 meters away from cutting off Avdiivka. Clearly, everything was falling apart, and this also meant that the positions previously held by the Azov Brigade have now since been lost to the enemy. From their current positions, it seems that the Russians will try to flank the Avdiivka coke plant. They could also push south to cut off any chance of retreat for the Avdiivka garrison, or they could also fight their way towards Lastochkine. Or another option is that the Russians don't close off the encirclement, the good old Mongol tactics, in order to draw all the Ukrainian defenders out in the open and annihilate them using their superior firepower, instead of forcing them into a last stand that could